Start the count of 5, Rob.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Colorado River Water User Association's CRWUA's Federal Friday. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Rob Manning, and I am the Chief of Public Affairs here at the Bureau of Reclamation. On behalf of Reclamation, we extend our deep appreciation to CRWUA for hosting this event and for allowing us to manage the technical requirements and platform for Federal Friday. Of course, that means that if there's any technical glitches today, I'm responsible. But we're excited. We're excited to have nearly 750 RSVPs for this event, and we have a robust agenda for you today and look forward to a great event. Before we get started, I have some admin notes to share with you. If you are having issues seeing or hearing this presentation, we recommend using the Microsoft Teams app on your computer versus in your web browser. Also, this is a Microsoft Teams live event. It is being recorded, and it will be available for viewing after the ceremony is complete at the same link that you clicked to join today. So thanks for taking the appropriate action if you do not want to be included in this live and recorded ceremony. At this time, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce the CRWUA President, John Ensminger.
Thank you very much. Welcome, and thank you for spending your time this morning with the Colorado River Water Users Association. My name is John Ensminger, and I'm the president of the association this year. 2020 marks the 75th anniversary of the association, a milestone worth recognizing. While the conference was canceled this year, we are pleased to be working with our partners on the river, the U.S. Department of Interior, and the Bureau of Reclamation to offer today's program. When I was elected president of CRWUA last year, our organization was fresh off of the major success of adopting the drought contingency plan, and I was looking ahead to beginning work on our next big lift, the renegotiation of the operational guidelines for the Colorado River due by 2026. Little did we know the year that we would face. I'm sure that all of you, like me, have felt as if we had our hands full just making sure we could effectively operate in this very different new environment. But, of course, through all of that, the issues of drought, climate change, the structural deficit, and the need to renegotiate the operational guidelines are still there. But before we turn our attention to 2021 and the challenges that lie ahead, I believe we should first recognize the substantial progress that has been achieved during the last 4 years. First, in 2017, we built upon the historic success of Minute 319 by finalizing Minute 323. I want to thank our partners in Mexico for leading the way and being the first to agree to make additional contributions of conserved water within Lake Mead. Then, in 2019, the river community finalized the drought contingency plan, thereby ensuring that appropriate safeguards are in place on the river during the renegotiation period. I would like to personally thank Commissioner Berman for her leadership in getting the DCPs done. It is my firm belief that if she hadn't thrown down the challenge to the states at the 2018 CRWUA conference, that the DCP would not have been finalized. Turning our attention to the challenges ahead. Yesterday, the 7 basin states notified Secretary Bernhardt of their intention to begin preliminary conversations to determine future recommendations to the department regarding operations for Lakes Mead and Powell beyond 2026. The states noted in that correspondence the importance of engaging with water users, tribes, NGOs, and Mexico as those discussions progress. The river community has achieved amazing progress over the last 25 years. And it is my belief that we can ensure a sustainable Colorado River for generations to come by continuing to work together. So I again welcome you to Federal Friday, and I will turn it back to our federal partners. Thank you.
Thank you, President Insminger. We will now receive an update on the hydraulic conditions within the Colorado River Basin from Mr. Dan Bunk. He is the Bureau of Reclamation's Boulder Canyon Operations Office Chief in the Lower Colorado Basin region. Mr. Bunk?
Thanks, Robert, and good morning, everyone. Here's a quick Colorado River system status update. Next slide, please. Lake Powell is currently at elevation 3585 with 10.4 million acre feet in storage, which is 43% of capacity. Lake Mead is currently at elevation 1083 with 10.2 million acre feet in storage, which is 39% of capacity. Total system storage, which includes system reservoirs above Lake Powell and below Lake Mead, is currently 46% of capacity. At this time last year, total system storage was at 52%. The decline is due to the below average inflow in basin in water year 2020, which was only 54% of average. Next slide, please. This chart shows the combined storage of Lakes Powell and Mead, shown by the blue bars and percent capacity in orange text, and inflow into Lake Powell, shown by the light blue line and percent inflow in white text. Since the drought started in 2000, there have been only 5 years of above average inflow, with only 2011 being the only really good inflow year. Since the 2007 guidelines were adopted during water year 2008, the combined storage of Powell and Mead has essentially hovered around 50% of capacity after dropping dramatically during the first 5 years of the drought. Unfortunately, given the dry hydrology in 2020 and based on current projections in 2021, Powell and Mead combined storage has the potential to decline to only 63% of capacity by the end of water year 2021. If this occurred, this would be the lowest combined storage, not only during the past 20 years, but also since Lake Powell was initially filling in the mid-1960s. Next slide, please. The 2007 guidelines use projections of January 1 conditions in August to set the operating tier for the upcoming year. This slide shows the Powell and Mead operating table under the 2007 guidelines and the Powell and Mead operational determinations for 2021. In water year 2021, Lake Powell is operating in the upper elevation balancing tier. Under this tier, Powell will release 8.23 million acre feet with the potential for an April adjustment to balancing or equalization releases. We are currently projecting Lake Powell to release 8.23 million acre feet in water year 2021. In calendar year 2021, Lake Mead is operating in the normal or ICS surplus condition. Lake Mead has operated in the normal or ICS surplus condition every year since the guidelines were adopted. Next slide, please. The Colorado River Basin drought contingency plans and Minute 323 with Mexico also use August projections of January 1 conditions to make operational determinations. Under the Lower Basin drought operations and Mexico's binational scarcity contingency plan, water savings contributions are required by both countries if Lake Mead is projected to be below elevation 1090. The table shows the water savings contributions by the lower basin states in Mexico at different Lake Mead elevation bands, as well as reduction volumes under shortage and low reservoir conditions. These are combined in the column on the right side of the table. As highlighted by the red box, The projected elevation of 1085.28 is within the upper elevation band between elevations 1075 and 1090 of the lower basin DCP and Mexico's water scarcity contingency plan. This projection requires contributions by Arizona, Nevada, and Mexico, totaling 241,000 acre feet in calendar year 2021. 2021 is the second year that water savings contributions have been required at this level, with 2020 being the first year that this was required. Next slide, please. Thus far, the hydrologic outlook does not look promising in 2021. A very warm and dry spring and near record dry conditions during the summer and fall months of 2020. Due to this, conditions were not favorable leading into this year's snowpack accumulation season. This chart shows the snowpack for all snow tail gauges in the upper Colorado River Basin. The black line shows a median accumulation curve, and the red line shows the snowpack trend in 2020. The blue line shows the snowpack trend thus far in 2021. As of December 15th, snowpack in the upper basin was only 70% of median. Combined with the dry conditions leading up to this year, the current Lake Powell inflow is forecast to be 6.23 million acre feet, which is only 58% of average. It is still relatively early in the water year, and there's still a wide range of possible outcomes, but current projections are not encouraging. Next slide, please. Lastly, we'll take a look at the 24-month study projections for Lake Powell and Lake Mead based on the December most probable scenario and the October minimum and maximum probable scenarios. In each of these scenarios, Lake Powell is projected to release 8.23 million acre feet in water year 2021. More noteworthy, however, is that both the most probable and minimum probable scenarios currently project Powell to operate in the mid-elevation release tier, which could result in a 7.48 million acre foot release in water year 2022. In each of these scenarios, Lake Mead's elevation is projected to be below 1090 at the end of calendar year 2021, which would require water savings contributions again in 2022. Under the most probable and minimum probable scenarios, Lake Mead's elevation is projected to be below elevation 1075, which is the elevation threshold for determining a shortage condition in the lower basin. Based on these projections, a lower basin shortage condition could occur as early as calendar year 2022. It is important to keep in mind that there is still quite a bit of uncertainty in these projections, and that the operational determinations for 2022 for Powell and Mead will be made in August of 2021, so approximately eight to 9 months from now. Next slide, please. Thank you. Here are a few web links for more information on current conditions and our operational projections. We will be updating our 5-year probabilistic outlook in January, so be on the outlook for that. Now I'd like to turn it back over to Robert Manning. Thank you.
Thank you for that great update. At this time, Ms. Carly Jurla and Mr. Malcolm Wilson from the Bureau of Reclamation will provide an update on the 2007 Interim Guidelines Review Report.
Thanks, Rob, and I'd like to express our thanks to John Ensminger and the CRWUA for allowing us this opportunity to share what has been a major effort on the part of the upper basin and lower basin regions of reclamation, and I would suggest our Washington office as well. So thank you for this opportunity. I think we need a slide here to kick this off. And A lot of you have probably seen many of these slides in the past through Reclamation's broad outreach through this process here. We ask you to bear with us as we share our information and what we've been doing over the past year here with others as well. So thank you. Carly and I would like to provide a broad and high-level overview of the effort on reviewing the interim guidelines that we've undertaken this past year, and then provide some conclusions of that review. So with that, we'll move to the next slide. So folks may recall back in the early 2000s that we were heading into a drought. We started off the early 2000s with a pretty much full system, and that can be seen in the graph there on the right, in the lower graph. And then going in through the early 2000s, by 2004, we were looking at the lowest hydrology that had been seen in almost 100 years of record in the basin. And the reservoirs did their job in terms of sustaining the water use through the basin, but by facing that hydrology and meeting those demands resulted in those reservoirs dropping to about 50% of capacity. That certainly raised a lot of concerns in reclamation, in the basin, and users. And so it was recognized that we needed to look at some better numerical operational guidelines for operating, especially in the lower elevations of the reservoirs and operating between the reservoirs. Several states had encouraged reclamation to look at that and come up with better numerical guidelines there. And that resulted in Secretary Norton challenging the states to come up with a drought mitigation plan in 2004. As a response to that, we initiated a NEPA process and went through that NEPA process, and that process resulted in an EIS and a record of decision, which included the 2007 interim guidelines, and essentially put them in place. And they were adopted in the first year after 2007, so 2008 was our first year actually operating under the guidelines. Next slide. In kicking off the review of the guidelines, we look to the purposes that are actually stated within the guidelines. There are three major purposes that Reclamation looked at in reviewing these guidelines. And these were to improve Reclamation's management of the river, considering trade-offs between frequency and magnitude of water deliveries, and considering the effects of the storage and operations on various resources. The second purpose stated in the guidelines was to provide mainstream U.S. users of the Colorado River, and particularly those in the lower division states, a greater degree of predictability with respect to how they might expect water to be available, especially under these drought and low reservoir conditions that we previously didn't have guidance for. The third purpose was providing additional mechanisms for storage and delivery of water supplies in Mead, and then allowing flexibility for water use needs from Mead, particularly in drought and low conditions. And that flexibility is something we acknowledge and note in the report, in that it provided flexibility to come up with some of the additional mechanisms and efforts that John touched on, the drought contingency plans, over this past 12 years. So those were the primary three purposes that Reclamation considered in conducting this review of the guidelines. Next slide, please. In addition to the primary purposes, there are a number of themes that were mentioned in the interim guidelines that Reclamation considered as it reviewed the effectiveness of the guidelines. And those are enumerated here: encouraging conservation, planning for shortage, implementing better coordination between Lake Powell and Lake Mead, and to preserve the flexibility, again, to deal with future challenges such as climate change, deepening drought, and potential for changing operations in response to those. We mentioned that this is implementing the operational rules for a long but not permanent time. And this again was a key mechanism or consideration in developing the guidelines, that this be a potential time for experiments in seeing if these particular guidelines and rules that are within them would work for the basin, and potentially how to look forward from those. To continue federal government facilitation of operations, but not dictate. We work with the states and with users in developing guidelines and developing operations for the basin. So again, to participate in but not dictate the decision making within the basin. And again, encouraging parties to address future controversies on the Colorado River through consultation and negotiation. And this has been, I think, one of the big successes of the interim guidelines, is that folks have come together through various mechanisms and through the discussions on the guidelines and subsequent actions to prevent folks from having to litigate responses that generally are not in the interest of folks in the long run. So that's a success that we certainly look to. Next slide, please. So in the interim guidelines themselves, in section 11G7D, which is a bit of a mouthful, which is why we, to prevent ourselves getting tongue-tied, has reduced this to 7D review. There's a statement there that says, beginning no later than the end of this year, the Secretary would initiate a formal review to evaluate the effectiveness of the guidelines, and that in doing that formal review, we'd be consulting with the states for initiating it. Folks may recall back in CRWUA last year, this time, Secretary Bernhardt announced that this provision provides an opportunity for reclamation in the basin to take a look at where we've been with these operational reviews, to evaluate the effectiveness of these rules is consistent with the interim nature, again, of the guidelines. And so it would make sense for all of us to take a look at how well these things have worked before we need to put in place a new set of guidelines, as John mentioned, by 2026. So the Secretary announced that he was asking reclamation that day that they would go ahead with the review of the guidelines in 2020, ahead of the deadline within the guidelines. And that really launched off our effort here over the past year in approaching this review and working with all of you to get your input and do a thorough review of the effectiveness and be able to present that at this time. Next slide. So our approach to the review, again, was looking at it as a technical report. It's incorporating, and as we heard from the Secretary in additional remarks made last year, we wanted to look to stakeholders, to states, to academics, to NGOs, to tribes in providing inputs and giving us a feel for their feelings on the effectiveness of the review and including those comments within the review. It's a retrospective look. It is looking back. It is not setting up a path for the future. It's not making any decisions or perspective on what might work in the future, but again, is looking at what has been the actions over the past 12 years or so under the guideline rules, and what have they resulted in. There are quantitative and qualitative elements within the report that look at the effectiveness. And then again, the effectiveness is evaluated in terms of the guidelines' ability to achieve those stated purposes and address those common themes that I mentioned earlier. There is an operational documentation, and we strongly hope that folks will take a good hard look at this, and that this documentation of the operations under the guidelines over the last 12 years provides a good foundation for folks to understand how these guidelines have worked over the past 12 years, and then how folks might look to the future. It is, again, a retrospective, so this is just a documentation of what has happened, but it's a documentation of what happened under the particular rules that we have been operating under since the guidelines were adopted. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to CRWUA, my co-manager of this process, who's with our Lower Colorado Basin office. and let her explain how we went through the report itself.
Thank you, Melanie. The review was conducted over the course of this year, beginning in late March when we held kickoff webinars, inviting basin partners and stakeholders to roll out the proposed scope, approach, and schedule for the review. And in following through on the Secretary's charge at CRWUA last year to be inclusive, we provided 2 formal opportunities for stakeholder input, denoted by the orange diamond on the slide, or the 2 orange diamonds. There was a period where we took in comments on the proposed scope and approach, and another in late October, mid-November, where we took in comments on the draft report. And in addition to these formal comment periods, we were available to meet with, and did meet with, many different partner stakeholder groups throughout the year to take in their input as well. We set out from the beginning to conduct an inclusive process, but the way we went about it ended up looking different than what would have been our traditional approach, given the new reality, where we would have conducted many in-person meetings. Everything was conducted virtually, but despite this, we worked to engage stakeholders in new ways and to make it easier on folks to participate, piloting new methods for stakeholder engagement along the way. Next, please. Out of those 2 formal comment periods, we received many comments from a wide range of partners. All of these comments are posted up on our website. They possible, recognizing some were beyond the scope. And although the comments did not result in a change to the review's approach to evaluate effectiveness, they did result in a change to the overall scope of the report. And in particular, there were many comments from different partners about the processes used to develop the guidelines, either regarding the modeling approaches, the resource analyses conducted, or the stakeholder engagement process. And the perspectives expressed through these comments were that these processes were too limiting and should be evaluated and reviewed. And while we were not inclined to expand the effectiveness review to include items beyond the operational provisions of the guidelines, we wanted to acknowledge and reflect these perspectives and included a section and language in the report to do so. Next, please. The final report consists of a main body with 9 sections, which is roughly 45 pages, and an appendix detailing our operational experience, which is over 100 pages. The first 5 sections provide the relevant setup to support the evaluation of effectiveness. Section 4 was added based on the comments received that express the importance of activities, operational decisions such as the DCPs, the minutes with Mexico, drought response actions, the pilot system conservation programs, and basin-wide studies such as the basin study or the 10 Tribes Partnership Tribal Water Study. The importance of those things that have been implemented or conducted since the adoption of the guidelines. And we wanted to provide a section to describe these, what we call complementary activities, as several were needed, the DCPs, the minutes with Mexico, for example, in addition to the guidelines to protect the system from the effects of ongoing drought. And the guidelines provided the stability and the framework to implement these actions. And this is a central point in our findings regarding effectiveness. The section also highlights 2 common threads that have been continued and enhanced through these activities, broader stakeholder inclusion and the incorporation of scientific information. And we anticipate those 2 threads to continue to be enhanced in the future. Section 6 was added to reflect the comments related to the processes used to develop the guidelines, as I previously this describes how the key factors, it starts out by describing how the key factors affecting Powell and Mead elevations have played out since 2008. really looking at how we got to where we are today. And then it walks through the key operational elements of the guidelines, ICS mechanism, coordinated operations, lower basin surplus and shortage, and describes our operating experience with these and any key observations. This section also provides, throughout this discussion of the operational provisions, a comparison of the projections made during these, regarding these operations made during the guidelines to what actually occurred. And in section 8, we evaluate the effectiveness, which I will elaborate on in just a little bit. Next, please. I briefly wanted to describe the appendix in just a little more detail, as it really is a wealth of information regarding our past 12 years of operations. So this walks through each year, 2008 to 2019, and for each of the key variables listed here, compares what was projected throughout the year in our 24-month studies to what actually occurred. This image shows graphically for water year 2016, and this is produced for each year, 2008 to 2019. And it shows how the projections for Powell and Mead elevation changed throughout the year and how they compared to the actual elevations. This graphic is accompanied for each year by multiple tables for all of the different variables that affect the outcome of these reservoirs. And then the appendix concludes with a summary in the error and biases in these projections and how that has affected operations. There's also a narrative discussion of any distinct operational events for each year. And we do hope that this will be a helpful resource going forward. Next, please. So to evaluate the effectiveness, as Malcolm explained, we describe how the guidelines play out with respect to their purpose and how they adhere to the common themes and the record of decision. So starting with the purpose at the top of the graphic, summarized are the three components of that purpose. First, improve reclamation management. Having objective criteria that was in place through the guidelines, no question, improved reclamations management. Before, there was not objective criteria for a full range of reservoir elevations. However, the drought necessitated additional action and criteria was developed. In the second part, predictability, particularly with respect to the lower basin state, structuring deliveries around specific Lake Mead elevations improved the predictability, and it led to a common framework to assess risk. In the third part of the purpose, providing flexibility through the ICS mechanism in particular. This was no question an effective drought response tool, and it provided flexibilities and played a critical role, saving nearly 3.2 million acre feet through the ICS mechanisms and programs inspired by ICS, or 40 feet in Lake Mead, and put us in a much better place than we would have been absent this mechanism and similar programs. But we learned that additional flexibilities were needed, and those were implemented through the DCP, and that in particular adding additional parties to participate and additional exhibits to the ICS program proved challenging. So moving down to the adherence of our common themes, improving conservation. Absolutely, there was robust conservation through the ICS mechanism and a similar mechanism that was built for Mexico. And this helped also facilitate other conservation activities. But again, there were some aspects that were limiting of the ICS mechanism. Planning for shortage, definitely that clearly defined shortage criteria provided the lower basin the ability to plan for shortages and take on additional mitigation activities to reduce risk as the drought continued. Closer coordination for the operations of Powell and Mead. Several experiences stand out. First, the predominance of balancing and equalization operations throughout the 12 years. This was the predominant operation. There was an April adjustment, in the majority of those 12 years, which really highlights the increased linkage between upper and lower basin activities. However, the prolonged drought undermined two of the key objectives of those coordinated operations as specified in the guidelines, which is minimizing shortages in the lower basin and avoiding the risk of curtailment in the upper basin. And because of that and the increasing risk of reaching critically low elevations, additional actions were necessary, and the DCPs and other voluntary adaptive actions had to be implemented. The guidelines supported flexibility and the stability and provided the stability for those additional actions. It was implemented not for a permanent period in order to give us an opportunity to gain valuable operational experience, and we absolutely did so. And last, and absolutely not least, and maybe the most important, the guidelines provided a way for the federal government to continue to facilitate but not dictate informed decision making in the basin. And through the Basin 7 States Agreement that was in support of the guidelines, there was mandatory consultation agreed to prior to litigation. And this really provided the flexibility and the stability to continue the long-term stable management of the Colorado River. Next, please. So in conclusion, Reclamation finds that the guidelines were largely effective as measured against their purpose and common themes. We say largely because additional action was needed because of the increasing severity of the drought and the increasing risk of reaching critically low elevations in Powell and Mead. Additional voluntary adaptive actions, the DCP and others, were needed to reduce that risk and bring the basin back to a more stable place. Our experience over the past 12 years provides important considerations when we think about increasing the effectiveness of these guidelines in the remaining years. One is with respect to enhanced flexibility and transparency for water users. Expanded participation in conservation and other programs is important. We also see the importance of the increased consideration of understanding the linkage that occurs from the highly coordinated nature of the two reservoir operations. And this really comes into play with modeling projections that affect operations when the reservoirs are sitting around critical threshold levels. And lastly, the demonstrated need for more robust measures to protect reservoir levels. Next, please. And with that, I want to thank you again for your attention and the opportunity to present. The website link is here where you will find the final report and other information about the review. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Rob.
Thank you very much for that superb update. On October 13th this year, President Donald Trump issued an executive order that established the Water Subcabinet. The purpose of the Water Subcabinet is to promote efficient and effective coordination across federal agencies engaged in water-related matters, and to prioritize actions to modernize and safeguard our water resources and infrastructure. Today, we're joined by several senior federal leaders. From the U.S. Department of the Interior, Assistant Secretary for Water and Science, Dr. Tim Petty. From the U.S. Department of Commerce, Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Oceans and Atmosphere, Rear Admiral retired Timothy Gallaudet. From the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the Assistant Administrator for Office of Water, Mr. Dave Ross. And from the Bureau of Reclamation, Commissioner Brenda Berman. These federal leaders will discuss accomplishments to date, current efforts, and challenges ahead. Dr. Petty.
Thank you so much, Rob. I greatly appreciate it. Could you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me?
We hear you loud and clear, Dr. Petty.
Outstanding. Thank you, Rob, and thank you for that warm introduction. I think it's a pleasure not only to be here with you, but this is our third time actually with CRWUA. The first time a number of us at the principals level within the different agencies came out to Las Vegas and interacted with you. It was at that time where we were able to really get some great feedback from this group. And it was from this group the concept has really developed into a point where the president really engaged in Western water. Out of his memorandum in 2018 that Rob referenced, out of that then came the executive order that earlier this year really codified so much of what the principles behind a group of us were meeting on a regular basis so that we could actually get things done. And that really was what this group with CRWUA was really asking of us, was that they needed help to get things done. And from that, we have learned so many different areas and the priorities that the CRWUA had given us in areas on the Colorado. Obviously, the continual huge work for water storage and supply, which is in the executive order. The other part of water quality, which so much of Bureau of Reclamation, EPA, works really hard to continue to develop, and working with the Department of Energy, which is also a part of the water subcabinet with Assistant Secretary Daniel Simmons on helping us with water quality and research. Obviously from there, the water systems itself, the talent of people, especially within all of the 7 basin states of the Colorado River, really exemplifies the importance of working not only with water systems, with water irrigation, with agriculture, with industrial, as well as communities all along the Colorado River plays a huge part in each and every one of those. The other area that I'm excited that Admiral Gallaudet's going to be speaking on is the importance of water forecasting. There are so many groups that are part of the Colorado River that's really looking on fine tuning, and hopefully we'll have some good comments from the Admiral there, but he's been an integral part of the water subcabinet. The other section, section 7, which is also critically important, is this area of water infrastructure and finance. And those parts was a really big work that the water subcabinet was interacting with the White House, with CEQ, with OSTP, and with OMB on the importance of dealing with water infrastructure, which then ties into our last section that I wanted to highlight, which is this water sector workforce. And I know actually David Ross was a huge part of helping us with really formulating out of EPA the importance of that workforce implementation that Commissioner Berman and her staff have built in to really build this section, which is part of the executive order. So with that, just a great aspect of why we've continued to come back to the CRWUA audience is that you really have that voice to continue the importance of what we've been able to do. I think there's going to be some examples used, some case studies, but it really is that ability for when I need issues solved and I can't do it all at Interior, where I can pick up and call David Ross, or I can pick up the phone and call Admiral Gallaudet over at NOAA, or even for that matter, picking up the phone and Undersecretary Bill Northey responding to us with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. All of those amongst ourselves, including Commissioner Berman, which is a part of the subcabinet, is a vital aspect of what is accomplished through getting things done and doing it well, and having all of the federal agencies working hand in hand to help solve the state issues that are going on for local governments as well. So I'm going to stop there. Again, thank you so much for all the work that you have done, the support that Secretary Bernhardt has given the Water Subcabinet, and the Commissioner and myself and Director Riley with the U.S. Geological Survey under Water and Science has been an integral part of why we do what we do. It's for the audience that is on this CRWUA call today. So with that, what I want to do is actually hand the mic over to David Ross. His picture's up. He looks a lot better in a picture, and but it's always a privilege to be able to interact with him. Yesterday, a big event for him dealing with 404 permitting, which is also part of the Army Corps, as well as Fish and Wildlife and NOAA and NIMS, So just great interaction that took place to get that across the finish line. So David, the mic is all yours. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate it. I just do a sound check. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, sure can. Loud and clear.
All right, perfect. Hey, well, thanks. Hey, everybody. It is great to be back with you again. It is, we really enjoyed our time, this group really getting on stage together a couple of years ago, and telling you a bit about what the early form of the water sub cabinet looks like and what we were working on. But more importantly, it was the hallway conversations after we were on the stage to get to have the sidebar conversations with the conference attendees as to what we're concerning you, what matters out in the landscape, what we can do here back in DC to try to solve your problems. What I wanted to do is talk a little bit, since Tim gave an overview of the executive order that the president signed in October, formalizing the water sub-cabinet and then directing our agencies both to continue to work together, continue our good government and good governance principles, but also gave us specific direction on some high priority areas. One that I want to talk about that's in the executive order is to ensure that we continue to implement the National Water Reuse Action Plan. And for those of you that don't know what that is, the National Water Reuse Action Plan was a document that EPA issued together with Administrator Wheeler, Secretary Bernhardt, Secretary Perdue at Interior and Agriculture, and Chairwoman Mary Newmeyer of the Council of Environmental Quality, rolled out the National Water Use Action Plan at an event in February 2020. EPA is the sponsor of the plan, but it really is a plan that was written by the water sector for the water sector, and developed in close coordination with water users and water quality experts and water irrigators, all of the above across the country. The genesis for the plan was really based on conversations that I was having with Tim and Brenda at the Department of Interior, and also with Daniel Simmons over at the Department of Energy. The Department of Energy was focused on their grand water security challenge, taking a look at what water looks like over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And Tim and Brenda were talking about some of the challenges that they were having out on the Colorado River, particularly with drought and storage levels. And the National Water Use Action Plan's primary focus is to look for new sources of water for this country over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. It is a critical part of the future of water and water policy in this country. And EPA's contribution was to use our power of convening across the multiple sectors and develop a plan, again, that was by the sector for the sector. The original plan, when we rolled it out, had at its base 37 identified actions, 29 individual action leaders, 87 partners identified, and that's federal, state, local, private sector, all of the above. We have representatives from the broad spectrum of interested stakeholders in water. There were 250 milestones that were identified in this action plan because it is an action plan. Importantly, this isn't just a static document. It is not a glossy, cool-looking thing that you stick on the shelf and then feel good about it and never look at it again, which government is really good at doing, by the way. Instead, we put the action plan in an online platform on EPA's website, and then we dedicated ourselves to public accountability. And I'm happy to report, since February, late February 2020, since that time, we have hit 125 of the 250 milestones that we identified. We have added 40 new milestones. We have added 4 new actions. We have made 750 updates to our online platform. And we are committed to providing public access, through newsletters that we put out on a quarterly basis and continuing engagement with our stakeholders. In other words, this is a living, breathing document that's intended to incentivize and push research, policy development, financing, innovation, everything needed to support water use going forward. It's in that plan. We have actions on it, And the best part, and the ask for you all, is if you're not participating, I'm going to ask why, and ask you to get involved. Reach out to the National Water Use Action Team at EPA and offer to take on an action. Help us help you search for more water going forward. EPA remains committed. So obviously, in addition to the action plan, we are leading several actions in the action plan. I think most importantly, in the Office of Water, we have contributed more than $1 billion over the last couple of years to water financing under our financial assistance programs, specifically for water reuse projects. And that's actually well north of $1 billion. And we have several more projects in the pipeline that we will finance in the coming months. We've identified and provided more research funding so that our science branch can help the sector continue to move forward. And we've also institutionalized our Water Use Action Team. I went through a reorg here at EPA Office of Water. I formalized my team. We have a National Water Use Action Leader, Sharon Napier, who is now has a permanent home with a permanent team, and that will be part of EPA's culture and institution going forward. So we're really excited about it. It's the same team that will also work with my workforce team. Tim mentioned that we're doing a lot of work in the water infrastructure workforce sector. It doesn't matter how much money you put into brick and mortar if you don't have the human capital to run it. And so EPA has a workforce strategy out on the street, and we're working with our federal partners to develop a whole of government strategy as well. So exciting stuff. Really proud of the team here at EPA with our friends and partners in the federal family. And look forward to and asking you all for continued engagement to help us make water reuse, a critical part of our 21st century water economy. With that, I'm going to turn this over, I believe, to Dr. Gallaudet, Admiral Gallaudet. I'm going to turn the mic to you.
Hey, thanks a lot, Dave, and thank you, Tim, and thank you, Commissioner Berman, for inviting me here and including me as a member of the Water Subcabinet. It's been a great team, and it's been a great ride over the last 3 years. And so I thought I'd just provide everybody an update on what NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, has been doing in this water space. And for CRWUA, the big thing is our water prediction capability that is exercised through the National Weather Service and supported by NOAA's research office. And to do water prediction well, we need to do weather prediction well. And so just some highlights over the last year or so. And then I'll start with the White House and the Hill. The Hill and the President signed the 2018 Weather Research and Forecasting Innovation Act, which directed a number of significant improvements in our weather prediction and water prediction. And that was reauthorized last year in the National Integrated Drought Information System Reauthorization Act. And then, of course, Tim Petty mentioned the Western Water Presidential Memorandum, where Section 3 of it directed a number of water forecasting improvements, which we are undertaking today. And then and that was all kind of added to by this recent executive order, where Section 5 talks about the National Drought Resilience Program and our contributions there, and also directs significant improvements in data management, research, modeling, and forecasting in Section 5D. So that's all just a ton of great top cover we have, and we've been implementing these improvements that the White House and Hill direction have provided. And so let me give you some examples of that. For example, this hurricane season, this was a record-setting season, and we had 30 named storms, 12 landfalling hurricanes, and 5 of them hit the state of Louisiana. And weather and water prediction mattered a great deal during those instances. And we upgraded our global model, and that allowed to improved accuracies like we've never seen before. Hurricane Laura hitting Louisiana, our forecast 3 days in advance was less than a mile error. That's how good we were. That informed tens of thousands of evacuations. We saved a lot of lives. If you just look at all these hurricanes summed up, we didn't see more than 50 lives lost. That is unprecedented. So kudos to the National Weather Service in improving prediction for weather and water and the great impacts that's had. Now, the prolonged drought in the West has caused something, that's also significant, and that is the wildfires. And a wildfire and the fire weather that we do to predict that and help firefighters in combating those. This was another record-setting year where we had 56,000 wildfires this year and 10 million acres burned. And our National Weather Service really stepped up to the plate. They have these incident meteorologists that surge forward like special forces and help firefighters combat the fire by giving high precision forecasts. So really proud of their work there too. And again, we made some significant improvements in prediction, especially predicting smoke and air quality and all that. So now a couple other upgrades that I think are worth talking about. We have a model that we use for hurricane forecasting called the Hurricane Weather Research and Forecasting Model, HWAR for short, and we made improvements this year and upgraded that model in August, just in time as the season hit its peak. And we made some great advances, and this new model has the neat feature of being able to assimilate now our geostationary satellite data. And so the improvements we saw were 5% improvement in track prediction and 8% improvement in intensity prediction. So those are really serious numbers in just a short time frame. And again, great progress there. And then we've improved a model that we use for longer range prediction. It's an ensemble forecasting system model. And now we've extended our prediction capability from 16 days to 35 days. So this is a 5-week model, and it's about a 25-kilometer resolution. But it's giving us that really, this is like getting into that area where it's really, important for water management to know what's going to happen in the week time scale. And then we made some improvements in the seasonal time scale as well. And these are all supported by 2 big research labs. We have one in Colorado, and we also have one in Princeton, New Jersey. And then for finer scale prediction, that's in the hourly time frame, we've improved this high resolution rapid refresh model, we call it. And so you can see there's a suite of prediction capabilities that we have from hours to a decade, and we've been working across the board to make improvements. A couple other things I think are worth mentioning. One is the Earth Prediction Innovation Center is a new NOAA program. We call it EPIC, and it's about advancing our global weather modeling and water modeling capability by including the community of researchers. We hadn't had that in place before. Now this is allowing basically rapid model upgrades. So it's an exciting new program that, again, this Weather Act that was signed by the president is allowing. We also have a national water model, which is informed by these weather models. And the national water model version 2.1 is going to be released in early 2021. And this is a model that can go out to 18 hours and 30 days for the ensemble type, and it includes 36,000 stream points, covers 5,000 reservoirs, and 2.7 million stream reaches. So we're pretty proud of the rapid progress we've made in that model's predictive capability, and we're continuing to advance it. And then I thought I might also mention that we're working hard to also improve snowpack predictions with reclamation. And for example, we have a great researcher in Princeton named Dr. Sarah Kapnick, who was able to prove 8-month predictive skill in snowpack estimates in research that she published in 2018, and we're working to transition to operations. Lastly, we're incorporating a wide range of emerging science and technology areas to improve our weather and water prediction. One area is autonomous systems, or drones. We're using aerial drones to monitor and predict the ice breakup in rivers in Alaska. We're doing the same to monitor flooding, for example, in the southwest or southeast U.S. And then we're using drones to also assess storm damage currently in Kentucky, South Carolina, and Virginia, and we're working to expand that. We're also using commercial cloud providers to improve the computing part of our modeling, and as well as big data analytics, if you will, with something we call our big data project. And then artificial intelligence and machine learning. We've made rapid advances in that area to improve our weather modeling and the data assimilation part of it. And in fact, what that is allowing us to do is use more data because AI and ML techniques are allowing us to really process huge volumes of data in orders of magnitude less time. So that's a really exciting area. And it's again been propelled by support from the White House when the president signed in 2018 the executive order on maintaining American leadership in artificial intelligence. So pretty proud of all the progress we've made. We're trying to run through the line and finish all this work up and really do good things for CRWUA and for the nation. So thanks for having me, Tim. Back to you.
Thank you so. Yep.
I'll jump right in there.
Yep.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's great to know that we have gathered CRWUA together again. It's hard not to picture the people I always know who stand in the back and chatter as we go through this, but it's great to be back with the sub-cabinet. This is just an incredible group of friends and colleagues. We've really gotten to know each other in the last 3 years. And everything that's been mentioned today already has such incredible practical on-the-ground applications. And that's what I see as Reclamation's role, working with you, the water community, for how do these things play out on the ground. And so looking at forecasting and the way we're modernizing forecasting at Reclamation and for others like Army Corps of Engineers who are operating reservoirs and dams, our flood control rules, those rule curves, were often designed 40 years ago, 50 years ago. Many of them really need to be modernized. And so we've been working with Army Corps of Engineers, but using those new forecasting techniques to say, let's be more flexible. We had a pilot up at Folsom Dam this past 2 years, and we were able to come up with new rules. So now if the reservoir is full, we don't automatically release water. We take a look at that forecast and we look ahead, and if there's no storm on the horizon, then we can hold that water a little bit longer. And I think that just has huge potential across the West. It's about finding more flexibility and reliability from that current system that we have. So really proud of the team for that. I also wanted to mention Dave Ross was talking about the water reuse. One thing about our partners, Reclamation is involved with our partners on water reuse. We have the Title 16 program, we have research and development, but so many of our partners at Department of Commerce, EPA, Army Corps of Engineers, Department of Ag, they have more impressive budgets than we do. And so while we can bring forward the Title 16 program, over at EPA, they have the WIFIA program to look at some guaranteed loans that can really help a community invest in water reuse. But we're right there. We're making sure that our programs align, and so we're not wasting or being redundant. We've worked very closely to make sure that our programs can work together. I thought I'd mention at least one other program. Some of you in the audience are very familiar with the Arkansas Valley Conduit. So that is a program, that is a project that was originally authorized by President Kennedy, so back in the 60s. And the reason, I think, there's probably many reasons, but it hadn't been started again until very recently. And what was truly amazing, what was able to come together was, one, we had such strong local support. Southeastern Colorado Conservancy District were the absolute champions of this project. But at the same time, we also knew that we needed state support. So the state of Colorado came in with big support. And for Reclamation, we knew it wasn't just us. When we look at our budgets, how do we get done a new project that is going to bring safe, reliable water supplies to 40 new communities? But we worked with the Department of Ag, and the Department of Ag has been a strong, true partner on the ground. They have a rural water supply program that can bring funding here, and that complements what Reclamation can bring to the table, along with the state and local contributions. So we're moving forward. It's really great chance. And I'll just mention one more thing, hydropower. We've had such a great opportunity to partner with Department of Energy and with the United States Army Corps of Engineers on hydropower. We celebrated that this August 24th on Hydropower Day. And what we've done is we have a memorandum of understanding, an MOU, that brought us together to make sure, again, we're aligning our programs. We're taking advantage of each other's research and development. We're making sure that we can combine efforts to make sure we have an educated workforce that's ready to work in hydro. And we sure needed them this year because they were the frontline workers for water and power this year. So we are working across with our federal agencies, and I just want to say kudos and thank you to my partners, Dave Ross, Admiral Gallaudet, Tim Petty. We've really been remarkable. I look to all of you in the audience. This is what you should expect from your federal government. You should expect efficiency, and you should expect us to be working together past our silos to get things done. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Berman, and many thanks to all of the federal leaders that are dedicated to working hard every single day in the interest of the American public. The United States and Mexico have a long history of collaboration on the Colorado River, and we are extremely proud of our ironclad partnership. It is a distinct pleasure to introduce the Bureau of Reclamation's Binational Program Manager, Ms. Amy Witherall. She will moderate an update on the U.S.-Mexico cooperative progress. Thank you, Amy.
Great, thank you. And thank you to all of our panelists today for joining us and all of you for participating remotely. I first wanted to mention that the panel will be closed captioned in English and subtitled in Spanish. To access the closed captioning or subtitles, you click the icon, it looks like a gear on the bottom right of your screen, and you can turn it on there. The binational panel is a wonderful opportunity at CRWUA to hear about progress across the basin, but in the last decade in particular on the U.S.-Mexico cooperative process. We've been honored in the past to have participation from senior leadership of the Republic of Mexico, and that is the case again today. We're excited to transition this panel to a virtual version and to see the high levels of interest and participation today. I wanted to give a little context for those not familiar with the partnership we have on the Colorado River between the US and Mexico. The 1944 US-Mexico Water Treaty allocated a basic allotment of 1.5 million acre feet to Mexico and established the International Boundary and Water Commission, or IBWC. It's a binational commission, and that oversees the treaty implementation. We are appreciative to have the commissioners from the US and Mexican sections of the IBWC with us here today. The 1944 treaty included the mechanism of minutes, which are implementing agreements to the treaty that require the agreement of both nations. This innovative concept allows for updates to implementation of the treaty over time with a binational approval. Most of the work you'll hear about today is enabled by recent minutes, Minute 319, which was adopted in 2012, and Minute 323 in 2017 to the treaty. We'll first hear today from Commissioners Jane Harkins and Humberto Marengo, and will then provide a short video showing water conservation projects constructed in Mexico with US support and funding as part of Minute 319. And then you'll hear from the US co-chairs of 3 of our binational work groups, Greg Walsh from Southern Nevada Water Authority, Tom Bushatsky from Arizona Department of Water Resources, and Jennifer Pitt with the National Audubon Society. The participation of our partners, non-governmental organizations, states, water districts, academics, federal agencies, and others is essential to our success in the binational process. We also want to highlight the value we at Reclamation place on our partnership with all agencies and organizations we work with in both the US and Mexico. As a final note, I'll be introducing each speaker individually as we move through the agenda. So first today, we have Dr. Humberto Marengo. He was appointed the Mexican Commissioner of the International Boundary and Water Commission in June of this year. Prior to this, he held various positions in the Federal Electricity Commission of Mexico, as well as academic positions at universities in Mexico. He has a PhD in hydraulic engineering from the National Autonomous University of Mexico and has worked as an independent consultant for dams and hydrologic projects. Haley Goodstein will provide consecutive interpretation for his presentation today.
Buenos días a todos. Es un placer estar esta mañana con todos ustedes. Les agradezco, les reconozco la invitación para acompañarlos en este evento. Y como señaló Ami, he sido designado como comisionado mexicano para la Comisión Internacional de Límites y Aguas entre México y los Estados Unidos, siendo el comisionado mexicano. Ya lo mencionó Ami, tengo el título de doctor en Ingeniería en Hidráulica, siendo profesor de la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México por 30 años y trabajé en la Comisión Federal de Electricidad en el área de proyectos hidroeléctricos por 35 años. Me tocó diseñar, construir y supervisar las presas más grandes que realizó México en los últimos 40 años, 35 años. Como ustedes saben, la SILA...
Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be with you this morning. I want to acknowledge and thank you for the opportunity and the invitation to accompany you at this event. As Amy mentioned, I have been appointed by my government as the Mexican Commissioner of the International Boundary and Water Commission, United States and Mexico. And as also she said, I have a PhD in engineering with a specialization in hydraulics from the Autonomous University of Mexico, where I have also served as a professor in the engineering department for 30 years. Prior to that, I did work also at the Federal Electricity Commission, where I have worked designing and building and constructing some of Mexico's largest dams.
Como ustedes saben, la SILA es un organismo internacional integrado por ambas secciones de México y Estados Unidos, cada una de las cuales está dirigida por un comisionado ingeniero.
As you know, the IBWC is an international organization made up of a Mexican section and a U.S. section, each of which is headed by an engineer commissioner. The IBWC is a pioneer binational agency that has assisted the two governments in the jurisdictional areas they are responsible for along the border between the two countries.
La SILA se ha constituido como un organismo pionero de carácter binacional que ha asistido a ambos gobiernos en las áreas de jurisdicción que le corresponde atender a lo largo de la frontera entre ambos países, enfocando su atención en el desarrollo de soluciones internacionales consistentes en proyectos de infraestructura diseñados de manera conjunta y construidos y operados por ambos países bajo la supervisión de la SILA.
What is the IBWC? It is a pioneer binational agency that has assisted both governments in the jurisdictional areas that they are responsible for along the border between the two countries, focusing its actions on the development of international solutions comprised of infrastructure projects jointly designed and built and operated by the two countries under the supervision of the IBWC.
La SILA tiene a su cargo la vigilancia y aplicación de los tratados internacionales entre México y los Estados Unidos de América en materia de límites y agua, negociar y formalizar acuerdos generados en el marco de sus atribuciones, asistir a sus gobiernos en los asuntos que les sean encomendados, así como operar y mantener la infraestructura construida bajo acuerdos, asegurando la integridad territorial.
The IBWC is in charge of overseeing and applying the international treaties between Mexico and the United States in boundary and water matters, negotiating and formalizing agreements generated within the framework of its duties, assisting their governments in the matters entrusted to them, as well as operating and maintaining infrastructure built under such agreements and ensuring territorial integrity.
La importancia y la cooperación de la colaboración de los Estados Unidos y de México en el río Colorado tiene como origen y en los últimos años la escasez del agua que ha venido prevaleciendo en la cuenca por cerca de 20 años. Los gobiernos instruyeron desde 2007 a la SILA para que identificara medidas que permitieran enfrentar dicha situación y evitar un colapso del sistema que pudiera afectar adversamente a los usuarios de ambos países.
The importance of the U.S.-Mexico cooperation on the Colorado River has its origins given the water scarcity that has prevailed in the basin for nearly 20 years. The governments in 2007 instructed IBWC to identify measures to address this situation and avoid a collapse of the system that could adversely impact users in both countries.
Un primer paso en este sentido fueron las actas 317 y 318 del 2010 y posteriormente el acta 319 en el 2012.
A first step in this direction were minutes 317 and 318 in 2010 and subsequently minute 319 in 2012.
Esta última, de carácter interino, sentó el precedente para el desarrollo del acta 323, que amplió y reemplazó aquella del 318, y el acta 323 firmada en 2017 destaca las acciones conjuntas acordadas para enfrentar condiciones de escasez de agua en el futuro con el acta 319.
The latter, minute 319 was put together on an interim basis, set the precedent for the development of minute 323, which expanded and replaced it. Minute 323 was signed in 2017, highlights the joint actions agreed upon to address water scarcity conditions in the future, originally addressed in 319.
De las aguas del río Colorado que le asigna el Tratado de 1944, México, entre el año 2012 y 2016, difirió la entrega de alrededor de 390 millones de metros cúbicos, 316,000 acre-pie de agua, guardándola en los embalses de Estados Unidos.
Of the Colorado River waters allocated to Mexico under the 1944 Water Treaty, between 2012 and 2016, Mexico deferred the delivery of about 390 million cubic meters, or 316,000 acre-feet of water, storing it in reservoirs in the United States.
Conforme a lo estipulado en esta acta 319, se ejercieron 21 millones de dólares, de los cuales 3 millones de dólares se destinaron a 8 proyectos de restauración ambiental en México, con los cuales se logró la reforestación y mantenimiento de más de 232 hectáreas, 573 acres, en sitios del delta del río Colorado en México.
In accordance with the provisions of Minute 319, $21 million were invested, including $3 million that were allocated to 8 environmental restoration projects in Mexico, which made it possible to achieve the reforestation and maintenance of more than 232 hectares or 573 acres at sites in Mexico's Colorado River Delta.
18 millones de dólares se destinaron a más de 50 proyectos de conservación de agua en el Distrito 014 en México, y dichos proyectos consistieron en el revestimiento de aproximadamente 30 millas de canales, nivelación de 1,000 hectáreas, 2,470 acres, el automatismo e instalación de 6 compuertas inteligentes, 8 kilómetros, 5 millas de entubado de canales, entre otros como la rehabilitación de pozos y canales de riego.
$18 million were also designated for over 50 projects for water conservation in Mexico's Irrigation District 14. These projects consisted of a lining of about 50 kilometers or 30 miles of canals, leveling of 1,000 hectares or 2,470 acres, automating and installing 6 smart gates, 8 kilometers or 5 miles of canal encasement, and the rehabilitation of wells and irrigation canals, among others.
Asimismo, con esta acta 319, México y los Estados Unidos aportaron 130 millones de metros cúbicos de agua durante el flujo pulso de 2014.
Additionally, under Minute 319, Mexico and the United States contributed 130 million cubic meters of water during the 2014 pulse flow.
Con el acta 323, se han aportado a la fecha más de 4 millones de dólares entre los dos países para la realización de proyectos de restauración ambiental en el delta del río Colorado en México y actualmente esta comisión está llevando a cabo la licitación de 4 proyectos de modernización de compuertas inteligentes con una aportación estadounidense de $5 millones, para los cuales, bajo los términos de esta acta, se asignarán a los Estados Unidos 45 millones de metros cúbicos de agua, 36.367 acres pie, para uso en los Estados Unidos.
Under Minute 323, to date, more than $4 million have been contributed by the two countries to carry out environmental restoration projects in the Colorado River Delta in Mexico. Currently, the Commission is carrying out the bidding process for 4 Canal SmartGate modernization projects, with a U.S. contribution of $5 million, in exchange for which, under the terms of the minute, 45 million cubic meters of water, or 36,367 acre-feet, shall be allocated to the United States for use in that country.
Los grupos binacionales de trabajo establecidos en el Acta 323 han celebrado más de 80 reuniones en el seno de la Comisión en los últimos 2 años. Los grupos instituidos por el Acta son hidrología, proyectos, ambiental, desalinización, salinidad y variaciones.
Binational work groups established in Minute 323 have held more than 80 meetings within the Commission over the past 2 years. The groups that form part of the minute are hydrology, projects, environmental, desalination, salinity, and flow variability.
Estos grupos binacionales de trabajo han registrado, entre otros, los siguientes avances: la finalización y publicación del estudio de oportunidades de desalinización en el Mar de Cortés en México.
These binational work groups have achieved the following progress: completion and publication of the binational study on desalination opportunities in the Sea of Cortés, Mexico.
Se han discutido los proyectos de conservación de agua a construir con la inversión estipulada en el acta.
The water conservation projects mentioned will be built with the investments as stipulated in the minute.
Ha desarrollado marcos y criterios binacionales para el monitoreo, restauración y entrega de agua para el ambiente en México.
Binational frameworks and criteria for monitoring, restoration, and delivery of water for the environment in Mexico have been developed.
Se han reunido para revisar e intercambiar información sobre las condiciones y pronósticos de la cuenca del río Colorado.
Regular meetings were held to review and exchange information on conditions and forecasts for the Colorado River Basin.
Finalmente, me permito reiterar el interés y el compromiso de México de continuar con los esfuerzos conjuntos de cooperación en el río Colorado en beneficio del sistema y de los habitantes de ambos países en la región.
Lastly, I would like to reiterate the interest and commitment of Mexico to continue with these joint cooperative efforts on the Colorado River for the benefit of the system and the people of both countries in the region.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Marengo, and thank you to Haley. Our next panelist will be Commissioner Jane Harkins. She's the U.S. Commissioner for the International Boundary and Water Commission and is responsible for applying the boundary and water treaties between the two countries. She previously worked at Bureau of Reclamation as Deputy Regional Director of the Lower Colorado Basin region, and most recently as the Executive Director of the Colorado River Commission of Nevada. She has extensive experience in the water resources field. And with that, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Harkins.
Thank you, Amy. It's great to join all of you today to talk about the successes that we've had on the Colorado River with our relationship under Minute 323. I'm going to provide you some background on Minute 323. You know, it really is the broad Colorado River Agreement we signed 3 years ago. It remains in effect through 2026. It followed several other Colorado River agreements over the last decade, Minutes 316, 317, 318, and 319. We've been busy. In 2010, we signed Minute 316, an agreement for a pilot run of the Yuma desalting plant while ensuring the conveyance of water to the Santa Clara wetland in Mexico. That same year, Minute 317 provided a framework for our Colorado River work, establishing work groups to explore water conservation options, system operations, and other aspects. It also ensured participation by the basin states in what has traditionally been a federal process. That was very key to that minute. On Easter Day in 2010, tragedy struck when a 7.2 magnitude earthquake shook the Mexicali Valley. The quake caused widespread damage to Mexico's irrigation infrastructure. To respond to this crisis, we signed Minute 318, which allowed Mexico to postpone some of its annual water deliveries until it could repair the damage. These agreements laid the groundwork for our next Colorado River deal, Minute 319. This was a 5-year deal covering 2012 through 2017. In that minute, we'd said we'd conclude another agreement to extend or replace its provisions through 2026. And that's exactly what we did when we signed Minute 323 in 2017. Minute 323 provides for shortage sharing by Mexico, starting at Lake Mead elevation 1075. It increased deliveries to Mexico during certain high reservoir conditions. It established Mexico's water reserve. This is essentially Mexican ICS, a means for Mexico to conserve water and store it in the United States. Since the concept of allowing Mexico to store water in the U.S. was first adopted in Minute 318, Mexico has deferred delivery of hundreds of thousands of acre-feet. This is an important amount that helps boost Lake Mead elevation to everyone's benefit. Minute 323 also provides for cooperation to minimize salinity impacts. It provides cooperation to minimize daily flow variability and deliveries to Mexico. And it provides water for the environment, focused on habitat restoration sites in Mexico. It provides for investment in water conservation projects in Mexico, as Commissioner Marengo described, with both countries benefiting from the conserved volumes. And significantly, Mexico signed up for the DCP in the form of the Binational Water Scarcity Contingency Plan. In July of last year, the Commissioner's principal engineers signed the joint report with the implementing details of the Binational Water Scarcity Contingency Plan, the U.S.-Mexico version of the Drought Contingency Plan. Under that plan, the amount of water delivered to Mexico is reduced and is accounted for as recoverable water savings. That means deliveries are reduced when Lake Mead is low, but that water is recoverable by Mexico when Lake Mead levels go back up. Provisions applicable to Mexico are modeled on those of the Lower Basin DCP. With the announcement of Reclamation's August 24-month study earlier this year, the Commission put out a joint news release announcing the water savings by the U.S. and Mexico in 2021 under the Binational Water Scarcity Contingency Plan. 41,000 acre-feet in savings for Mexico and 200,000 acre-feet under the U.S. Lower Basin DCP. Mexico has been a great partner with the U.S. as we manage drought in the Colorado River Basin. In fact, Mexico signed on to the Binational Water Scarcity Contingency Plan before the U.S. entities signed on to the Drought Contingency Plan. I want to acknowledge Mexico's partnership in being the first. Funding under Minute 323 includes $31.5 million in funding from U.S. sources for water conservation projects in Mexico through 2026. This investment provides for long-term water conservation benefits in Mexico for the life of the projects. It provides for 70,000 acre-feet of water considered the U.S. share for the environment, and 50,000 acre-feet for the system, and 109,100 acre-feet for other U.S. funders. This month, we expect to receive a water transfer from Mexico of just over 36,000 acre-feet, the first installment on the 109,100 acre-feet that will be exchanged over the next 6 years. Minute 323 establishes various issue-specific work groups and a policy-level group known as the Minute Oversight Group. We've continued to meet regularly despite the pandemic. Thanks to technology, we're able to conduct binational meetings via telephone or webinar while providing simultaneous interpretation in English and Spanish. During 2020, nearly 30 meetings were held. You will hear from some of our work group chairs in a moment about some of their accomplishments. Work group participation has included the Bureau of Reclamation, Mexico's National Water Commission, or CRWUA, U.S. and Mexican irrigation districts, state and municipal water agencies from both countries, environmental organizations from both countries, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Geological Survey, the Upper Colorado River Commission. The Minute Oversight Group, or the MOG, has participation from 3 commissioners, Commissioner Marengo, Commissioner Berman, and myself. The fact that we were able to move forward with such an active program despite the pandemic is a testament to the importance both countries have placed on the Minute 323 process and the work involved there. And I do want to take time to thank all of the folks in the US and Mexico participating in those work groups. And I want to thank the agency leadership and their board members for allowing those staff to participate. That work group participation is key to implementing the agreements between the United States and Mexico that benefit both countries. Just want to say happy holidays to everyone, Happy New Year to all of you, and I look forward to meeting you again in person next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And so thank you to both commissioners. We truly appreciate your remarks and your time today. For the next phase of the panel, you'll get to hear specific details on some of the recent projects and studies we've accomplished during the implementation of Minutes 319 and 323, as well as future plans. First, we'll show a short drone video of recent water conservation projects in Mexico. Some of the infrastructure repaired under Minute 319 was damaged by the catastrophic earthquake in Mexicali on Easter Sunday in 2010. And these videos show the infrastructure improvements we're making in Mexico by working together. So if we could start the video, please. There we go. So here is one of the many canals constructed under Minute 319. You'll see modulo numbers as we go through the videos, and that's the section of the Irrigation District 14 in the Mexicali Valley. This canal was completely replaced and improved with the concrete lining. The old canal can be seen on the left side, which was affected by the earthquake I just mentioned. And at the time of the filming, this project is near 100% complete, but you can see even before full completion, the canal was operating. This video here, Modulo 8, is a different type of project executed under Minute 319. This is an automatic gate control structure and improves water efficiency by improving the control and measuring flows at the site. This is another example of a canal lining project in Modulo 11. Showing Modulo 11 here, another example, canal lining. This project was different than some of those canal lining control structure projects. It's a laser GPS machine leveling project. The goal is to reduce the water needed to irrigate the crops and increase water efficiency in the area, and additionally help with soil salinity issues. Projects shown so far are in Baja California. Oops, looks like we just missed the end of it, but the last video was showing some projects also in Sonora, Mexico. And with that, we will transition to the portion of the panel where the three of the U.S. work group co-chairs will provide background information and updates. And our first Co-chair is Greg Walsh. He is the general counsel at the Southern Nevada Water Authority, and he was a member of the U.S. negotiating team for Minute 323. In addition to being a lawyer, he also has a background in engineering. Greg is the U.S. co-chair for the project's work group and will provide remarks on that work group.
Thank you very much, Amy, and thank you for all the work that you do for the binational work group. You forgot to mention I won the ugly sweater contest. That should also go on my next resume. A little over 8 years ago, having recently been lured out of private practice by John Ensminger's promise that I could work on Colorado River issues, particularly Mexico, I found myself on the veranda of the Hotel del Coronado watching a sunset, smoking a Cuban cigar and drinking a nice scotch, a Highland malt, I believe it was. And I thought to myself, you've really might be onto something here. But the real treat of that evening was meeting the Mexicans for the first time face to face. Until then, I'd only been working on the domestic agreements in the US, which are attendant to the minutes that we've been executing, and it describes how we how our obligations and rights are set out within the states. I met a bunch of folks there that evening, but one I wanted to mention in particular was former Commissioner Salmon, who I found myself in the middle of a conversation when he leaned into me and he said, you know, all of this is about the people. And what he meant by that was the trust and respect that's necessary in order to accomplish great things. And we've taken that to heart in the project's work group as we've had further opportunities to have a dialogue about how best to conserve water for both countries. Our group emphasizes that while the projects in Mexico to conserve water need to benefit both countries, the long-term conservation benefit must accrue to Mexico as well. So the work group consists of, as Commissioner Harkins noted, several different groups. But in order to kind of get the buy-in that we need, we start with NGOs. Ordinarily, they're listed last. It's important to recognize their contribution here in as much as the work that they're doing on the restoration sites needs to be protected and furthered as well. So we have NGOs, we have, of course, representatives from IBWC, the International Boundary and Water Commission, CRWUA and the Bureau of Reclamation, irrigation district representatives where those projects occur, academics, and of course, U.S. funders and state representatives. Amy went over the 319 projects that have been completed so far. There's over 50 of them. They largely involve, again, these types of projects that provide for a durable conservation benefit. Canal lining, well construction, encasement, literally translated entubement of canals, and laser leveling of fields. When the 319 projects were first commenced, we had a little difficulty getting them off the ground. So we're quite pleased to see that Mexico has been able to complete 99% of the projects. There's just a few things to be done before the end of the year. The money will all be moving to Mexico to the extent it has not yet early next year, and the water was transferred as promised by the end of 2017. As Commissioner Marengo noted, the Minute 323 projects are underway. The first will be 4 different gate control structures that will help conserve water and reduce waste. These are in larger federal canals, and the expectation is that in accordance with our ambitious schedule of finding water and transferring water, again, that a little over 36,000 acre-feet of water will be transferred to the U.S. In exchange for $5 million by the end of the year. And of course, the benefit of these gate control structures long-term will accrue to Mexico's conservation. We do have an ambitious schedule in the project's work group, and I wanted to cover that a bit. We set out different steps in time so that we could kind of measure our progress. By September of 2022, the U.S. environmental commitment of 70,000 acre-feet of water must be provided for. By December of 2023, another 36,000 acre feet of the U.S. funder project water needs to be transferred. And again, the same thing by the end of the minute in 2026. Importantly, however, the minute negotiating group recognized in minute 323 that while we have a certain environmental commitment today, there's a target of another 195,000 acre feet that we need to go find as part of the minute and as part of the project work group. So for 2021, I just want to cover a couple of goals that we've got for the project work group. First is find more water. I just indicated how ambitious our schedule is. It is difficult to find that kind of water in a drought, but we need to find it. Mr. Bunk covered the fact that the system itself is while healthy, we're diminishing in storage, and we need to clearly figure out different ways to conserve in both countries. So the minute, in addition to providing project water, had the project work group evaluating the potential of new water sources. In each of these water sources, it was known that a new minute would be required in order to fund and construct that project. There are 5 specific ones listed that required evaluation. The first is Pacific Ocean desalination. The next is New River desalination, Sea of Cortez desalination, effluent reuse in the Mexicali Valley, and effluent reuse from the South Bay International Wastewater Treatment Plant within the U.S. Any of these projects will require a new minute, as I noted, but importantly, the project's work group was to evaluate all pertinent aspects for each of these projects, including volumes, cost and distribution of the water, in other words, the split between the two countries, the potential for exchange, and the benefits to be generated for both countries that would be realized. It's important that we be able to evaluate on a kind of apples to apples basis the benefits of any of these types of projects. So we are in the midst of preparing a matrix that will allow for that kind of evaluation and in discussions with Mexico about how best to produce that work. Yeah, none of it will be easy. Dan Bunk's presentation makes clear again why we need to do it. We need to double our efforts and our creativity in order to make it work. I neglected, and I noted that the slide is now put up on the viewer here to discuss where these projects occur. I'll just do it very briefly. So you see the international border at the top of the screen. You're looking at the states of Baja, California, and Sonora, with Sonora lying east of the Colorado River, which is in blue on the right side of the screen. And each of the green areas are areas where we've done canal lining, again, gate control structures, well construction, entubement, etc., to provide for long-term conservation. Again, there are over 55. They're largely complete, and they'll be done by the end of December. So thank you again, Amy, for allowing me to elaborate on what the project's work group is up to and what we plan to do over the next year or two. It's been a real pleasure to work on it with Mexico and yourself. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Greg. And our next panelist today is Tom Bushatsky. He is the director of the Arizona Department of Water Resources and was a member of the U.S. negotiating team for Minute 323. Tom has worked in the water resources management field in Arizona for about 39 years and is the U.S. co-chair for the desalination work group, and he will be providing remarks about the desalination work group.
Thank you, Amy, for the good introduction. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank Commissioners Marengo, Harkins, and Berman for inviting me to speak today. I don't have enough time to name all the members of the group from both the Mexican and U.S. delegation, but Greg, in his discussion of his members, basically talked about the same membership organizations that I have in our group. I do, however, want to give a shout out to my co-chair, Sergio Avila, from the state of Sonora. Thanks to Sergio and all the members for their tireless work on this group. You heard from Greg Walsh about the projects work group and some of the new water projects in their wheelhouse. Minute 323 also called out for the study of a specific potential new water project, desalination opportunities in the Sea of Cortez. A key ask was to look at projects that could create binational benefits. That charge is what our work group is all about. Entities in Mexico and the United States have been looking at various potential desalination projects in the Sea of Cortez for many years, but this effort is focused through minute 323. The minute specifically references a previous effort and an effort that's still ongoing on desalination by the Arizona-Mexico Commission. That commission consists of the state of Sonora and the state of Arizona. Our group has completed a study in June of 2020, and that study is posted on the websites of the Mexican and US sections of the IBWC. It's a robust study, and it's nearly 800 pages long when you include all of the technical memoranda. So this slide shows the study area. As you can see, it includes the US and Mexico border area, as well as the Sea of Cortez. I want to highlight a couple of items on this slide. First, the group has been looking at the east side of the Sea of Cortez. If you look there at the labels for Bahia San Jorge, that is kind of the north area that we're looking at, and the south area is in that Puerto Libertad area further down on this slide. The purple, green, or red, green, and blue hatched areas are environmentally sensitive or unique areas. That clearly was one key component of what we studied, recognizing the sensitivity and the need to protect those areas for any project that might move forward. In total, we are looking at a target volume of up to 200,000 acre-feet per year of desalinated water, likely to be delivered to the Yuma Morelos Dam area, which is at the top of the slide. The minute contemplated that the binational benefits might be created through exchange of Mexico's Colorado River water allotted under the 1944 treaty or by direct delivery. So while substantial work has been done in this group since the spring of 2018 to get to the point of this initial study being completed, we have much more work ahead of us. Additional information is needed regarding delivery routes and mechanisms and power resources. Scoping for the next phase of the study is beginning with the goal to refine and expand upon the existing study. That phase is expected to take about a year. This additional study will help us identify the best locations, technologies, plant capacities, efficiencies, brine disposal methods, and delivery routes. And of course, we're looking at the cost. And so that gives you an idea of the elements that we all looked at as we went through this study. Eventually, the desalination opportunities will be evaluated with projects flowing out of Greg's group to determine which projects might be the most feasible. If a desalination project does become feasible, it is expected that another minute will be required to launch an actual project. This is an exciting opportunity for both countries and may create the needed multiple binational benefits. It is yet another example of the value of the collaborative partnership continued by Minute 323 and a recognition of Mexico as an invaluable partner in the management of the Colorado River. I will mention as well that the study was facilitated by consultants both on the US side and on the Mexico side, and funded by partners in California, Arizona, and Nevada. Those partners are expected to also fund the next phase of the study. So with that, I would just like to close by saying, given Dan Bunk's report on the hydrology, I will implore all of you who intend to listen to holiday music to focus on one song over and over again. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. Thank you all.
Thank you, Tom. And our next panelist is Jennifer Pitt. She is the Colorado River Program Manager, the National Audubon Society, and co-led the binational teams that developed the environmental components of Minute 319 and Minute 323. Jennifer leads Audubon's efforts throughout the Colorado River Basin to improve water security for communities and nature. She is the U.S. co-chair for the Environmental Work Group and will provide remarks on that work group.
Thank you very much, Amy. The binational partnership that has been built through the treaty and the minutes have not only allowed the United States and Mexico to work together to improve the reliability of water supply for people, they're also allowing us to make progress in the reliability of the Colorado River water supply for nature. In this binational partnership, we're beginning to address the loss of the Colorado River Delta, which hasn't seen regular river flows for more than half a century, resulting in the dry channel you see top left. After Minute 319 was signed, the United States and Mexico worked together in 2014, along with stakeholders, including a binational coalition of environmental NGOs, to deliver a pulse flow of water from Morelos Dam at the international border into the Colorado River Delta. So for 8 weeks, the Colorado River flowed once again towards the sea, prompting a remarkable resurgence, bringing the river back to life for wildlife and people alike. The pulse flow also created lasting impact by giving the desiccated ecosystems a big drink of water, nourishing remnant wetlands and forests in the Delta. Next slide. If Minute 319 allowed us to demonstrate that we can deliver water for environmental benefit in the Delta and recreate some of the Delta's missing ecosystem with active restoration, then Minute 323 is giving us an opportunity to scale up. Today, our restoration efforts benefit from investments in monitoring and science to optimize environmental water deliveries for maximum ecosystem benefit. And we are adding to those acres of restored Delta habitat in ways that increasingly reconnect the river. You see on the right, the restoration sites highlighted in yellow. In all, nearly 1,500 acres of riverside wetlands and forests have been restored, and under Minute 323, there is more to come. Next slide. All this work is the result of an incredible collaborative process that includes numerous federal and state agencies from both the US and Mexico, universities from both countries, as well as Raise the River, a binational coalition of environmental NGOs. Collaborative implementation with this many partners, and we're not just there to oversee a process that somebody implements, but we together implement this program. It can be a challenge, but it's also the key to creating durable results and sustainable ecosystem restoration. Next. This incredible collaboration also means that there are a lot of people putting heart and soul into our successes. And here you see the people who make up this binational environmental work group. It's a collection of incredibly dedicated individuals who are committed to finding the path forward to restore the Colorado River in its delta for nature and people. And we do this together despite our differences in nationality, language, law, economics, and culture. We took this picture the last time we met in February of 2020, and while we have seen each other regularly on screens since then, I, for one, am looking forward to spending more time again soon with this group that is dedicated to binational progress on the Colorado River, this group of friends. So with that, I thank each and every one of you for your interest and support in restoring the Colorado River Delta. Stay safe and happy holidays.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. And we all agree. We all want to be back together in person again. Thanks to all of the panelists for your time and your insight today. We also want to thank those of you participating virtually in CRWUA for joining us and learning a little bit about the hard work that we're doing between the United States and Mexico. And I also wanted to encourage anyone who wants more information or has any questions to reach out to me or any of our panelists. We're all incredibly proud of the work that we're doing and want to help you understand our efforts. And so with that, I will turn it back over to Rob.
Thank you. And muchos gracias, el Dr. Marengo. And thank you to each of the panel members for an incredible update on our vital binational partnership and projects. At this time, it is my distinct pleasure to once again welcome our keynote speaker, the 23rd Commissioner of the Bureau of Reclamation, Commissioner Brenda Berman.
Good morning, CRWUA. I would like to express my thanks to CRWUA for making this virtual gathering possible. I appreciate very much the CRWUA board deciding to host this virtual Federal Friday. And this is a tradition we can't give up, even in a year like this. I was thinking through this is the time of year you think about CRWUA. And my first CRWUA was in 2002, a momentous year on the river. And I have attended every year since. In terms of this virtual CRWUA, we thought it was very important to invite the basin to get together as a group, to see the familiar names and faces from across the basin, to review the progress we've made this year and over the past 4 years, and to recognize that despite the challenges facing our nation and the world, and despite our inability to gather in person for the time being, we have to do our best not to lose the connections that make this basin work so well. We thought it was important to share our perspective from our federal vantage point and from our partners' vantage point. And I hope you found the presentations thoughtful and informative. Great job, team. Just really impressive. I'd certainly like to thank from Reclamation, Dan Bunk, for updating us on the state of the hydrology. It is not easy to deliver bad news. I'd like to thank Carly Gerla and Malcolm Wilson, who carefully and expertly guided the development of the 7D report throughout this year. And I'd like to thank Amy Witherell, our tireless binational program manager. We also appreciate the opportunity to visit with a Colorado River Basin leader, Commissioner Jane Harkins. We are very fortunate to have an IBWC commissioner with deep knowledge and experience across the basin. And we appreciated the opportunity to meet a new partner in the basin, Commissioner Humberto Marengo from CILA. I appreciate the challenge of coming to a new organization, but doing so during an ongoing health crisis is an extraordinary task. Commissioner Marengo, we all wish you and your team health and success.
Thank you very much. The same to you, and thank you very much. You are very kind.
I also want to thank Dr. Tim Petty, our Assistant Secretary of Water and Science, for his efforts to work with our colleagues across the federal agencies. Tim is a passionate believer in making government more efficient and effective, and we're seeing the fruits of his vision in the efforts of the Water Subcabinet. I don't think there's ever been as much coordination as there is routinely today among Interior, the Ag Department, Department of Commerce, EPA, Corps of Engineers, FEMA. Thank you, Tim. You've improved our operations and engagement with your vision and your drive, and you've done that all with great humility and efficiency. This morning, I'd like to highlight a few key messages with all of you, our partners in the Colorado River water community. First and foremost, I wanted to take this opportunity to tell you directly, it has been an absolute honor for me to get to work alongside you in this basin. The hard work, the accomplishments, we did it, and we did it together. As I mentioned when I visited with the Upper Colorado River Commission earlier this week, when I was sworn in as commissioner in December 2017, my first public act was to get on a plane, travel to CRWUA, and meet with the UCRC. And I must say, coming back to CRWUA then was a wonderful way to restart my federal service. Back with the dedicated men and women of reclamation, back in the Colorado River Basin among colleagues and friends to take on the challenges facing us all. And those first few days, I also met with the 10 Tribes Partnership, and we started a remarkable dialogue with Daryl Behill, Lorelei Cloud, Chairman Patch, and so many others. And we agreed at that meeting to work together to prioritize the completion of the tribal water study. In those first meetings that week, with many of you who are here today, we all recognized that there was a risk that we were facing on the Colorado River Basin that was unacceptably high, and that action was needed. And I'll come back to that in a few moments. But just as far as history, I had joined Reclamation back in 2005, and that was largely based on my experiences working to help resolve water issues in Arizona. From the beginning of my career, I had learned the importance of dealing with scarcity, crafting consensus-based agreements, and attempting to resolve conflicts without litigation. And that remained my vision and approach as I accepted the offer to serve as Reclamation's commissioner. And the first observation that I want to highlight is that my experience as commissioner has only reinforced my strong belief that there is an approach and an ethic in this basin that is unique across the West. We should be very proud of what we've done here. The proven track record of successes and the collaboration across state lines, basin boundaries, and our international border is unparalleled. As we left CRWUA and began 2018, I think we all realized that the efforts to complete drought contingency plans needed to be brought to completion, one way or another. And the risk that our reservoirs were reaching critical levels was just growing. Discussions among the states and the department dated back to the summer of 2013. Focused attention and action was overdue. By the time we arrived back at CRWUA in December of 2018, we had done an extraordinary amount of work together with the 10 Tribes Partnership, and we published our groundbreaking tribal water study. I'm so proud of that work we did together. The news on efforts to complete the DCPs was not as encouraging. It was clear to many of us that an essential element was missing from efforts to complete those DCPs, and that was a deadline. So we established a clear timeline for completion, and the leaders in this basin found a way to reach consensus. I want to particularly commend the leaders in the upper basin and lower basins who focused on what we needed to gain a 7-state consensus. In the upper basin, the states forged agreements adopting objective triggers to implement drought response operations and to reduce the risk to Lake Powell. They also established a mechanism and a process to consider demand management and storage programs in the upper basin. And they didn't do all of this alone. I'd like to thank our federal colleagues at the Fish and Wildlife Service, the National Park Service, Western Area Power Administration, for the essential contributions they made as part of the state-led team in the upper basin that put together the drought operations agreement. NGO organizations were also an essential part and contributors from the earliest discussions that led to those drought operations agreement. They've also been critical partners in our upper basin system conservation efforts, and we want to recognize their contributions. In the lower basin, the states, along with the tribes and the NGOs, work together to craft an innovative set of operations that are designed to significantly reduce the risk of Lake Mead declining to critically low elevations. The lower basin operations contain a mix of mandatory reductions in savings coupled with innovative provisions to incentivize conserving additional volumes of water and leaving the conserved water in reservoirs over long periods of time. The general managers, their boards, and the governor's representatives from the 3 lower basin states showed leadership and ingenuity in designing this plan. It contains groundbreaking elements and partnerships, and it took real leadership to push the DCPs across the finish lines. Particular kudos to Arizona, both for tackling the greatest reductions and for securing the legislative approvals for the DCPs, the only state in the basin that has that extra hurdle. Working together, the essential support of key participating tribes, NGOs, and the basin states led to congressional passage of DCP legislation without opposition in either house in a matter of days. That is almost unprecedented. The extraordinary success of the DCP legislation was due to what this basin does best, being partners, doing the hard work of coordination and compromise, and working together effectively. Now, DCP implementation is underway. At Reclamation, we're working closely with partners in the upper and the lower basins. In the upper basin, earlier this week, when I met with UCRC, I noted that one of the last elements of the DCP package that was put together was Demand Management Storage Agreement. This agreement provides a mechanism for each of the 4 upper basin states and the Commission to assess and determine whether this water management tool can be implemented in a verifiable and effective manner. I realize that implementation of a demand management program is not a foregone conclusion. In the upper basin, Reclamation is funding work with the UCRC to assess the opportunities and approaches to demand management. I recognize that there are very thorny legal and operational issues to be worked out within each of the 4 states. Questions about quantification of savings, how do we shepherd water, they need to be carefully considered in a thorough and a transparent manner. But I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to encourage continued progress on this tough task. We are encouraged that this work is proceeding. We know that UCRC has invested in this effort, and we recognize that analysis is underway in each of the 4 states. Reclamation is committed to working with you on the technical support for these efforts. In the lower basin, Reclamation's focus is on our assessment of options to create or conserve additional quantities of Colorado River water. Under the DCP, we are actively working to secure savings of up to 100,000 acre-feet a year. The Lower Colorado region has conducted outreach to discuss ongoing and potential projects for this goal. Our focus is to prioritize those long-term projects, recurring projects that will generate savings over a longer period. But we're also looking to bridge the gap over this next few years with one-time system conservation agreements. This has been a top priority for me, and I am glad that the Lower Colorado region has taken this task, focusing on projects that can be implemented in a responsible, timely, and cost-effective manner. And I thank everyone for their participation and suggestions. While these efforts are proceeding, as you are all well aware, this is the time of change within the leadership of the basin, including important changes at Reclamation. Brent Esplin, Reclamation's former Upper Colorado Basin Regional Director, is now leading our efforts in the Missouri River Basin, up in Montana, all the way down to Texas. I'm very pleased to take this opportunity to announce that we have found a successor, and we are breaking tradition. We have chosen someone not named Brent. We are very pleased to announce today that Wayne Pullen will be the new regional director in the Upper Colorado River Basin region. We're very excited and pleased that Wayne has accepted this position. Wayne is following the footsteps of some terrific leaders in Salt Lake City that I've worked with and learned from Rick Gold in the guidelines, Larry Wachowiak, Brent Rees. Wayne knows the basin, and he recognizes the importance of working together to reach solutions. He also possesses a humility that recognizes that in water management, we always have more to learn. I see terrific days ahead for Wayne and for the Upper Colorado region, and I want to wish him great success. But Wayne's appointment still leaves an important opening. Terry Fulp, for decades a fixture in this basin, retired after a distinguished career from the Lower Colorado River Basin. I don't know how many folks knew this, but in 2018, Terry was chosen for a Presidential Rank Award. That is one of the highest awards that the nation bestows on its civil servants. And I can't think of a more deserving person. Terry had an incredible influence in how we approach water management in the Colorado River Basin, with greater integration of science, with more transparency and inclusion, and with a fierce determination to do the right thing, regardless of the difficulty. Terry retired in October, and he is deeply missed. One of Terry's great legacies is the talent he helped to recruit and develop as part of our partnership with CRWUA, our research team based at the University of Colorado at Boulder. Terry was part of the CU team, and he believed in continually improving reclamation's capabilities and working to help improve the capabilities of our partners on the river. Over the past year, once DCP was completed and we could all catch our breath, we set out at Reclamation to assess how can we improve our technical and modeling capabilities to support the work in the years ahead. We see many opportunities to continue to improve our decision support capabilities in the basin, whether it is by continuing enhancements to our riverware models and their decision frameworks, expanding collaborative efforts with climate researchers, or pulling in more expertise from our extraordinary staff at CRWUA. We are hopeful that Reclamation's increased focus and investment in these areas will lead to insights and innovation, as well as productive and successful efforts in the years ahead when the department begins on post-2026 operations. In the days ahead, the upper and lower regions will begin to focus on timelines. You heard that from John Ensminger. Processes. We'll be working on a wide range of modeling approaches to engage on what some refer to as the Guidelines 2.0. So this is a time of a lot of change. We're coming to the end of a very productive 4-year period on the river. We'll see continuing change in personnel as retirements and promotions occur and administrations conclude. But perhaps the one thing that I have seen firsthand over the past couple of decades is the importance of what doesn't change on this river. I am very confident that you will continue to see Reclamation's commitment to technical excellence, objective decision-making, and facilitating sound decisions. I'm very confident that this basin will continue to find innovative, collaborative solutions to extraordinarily challenging problems. And I'm certain that other water challenge regions will continue to be inspired by the work you all do. With the duration of the drought, the anticipated persistence of declining runoff, and the range of needs and demands in the basin, I believe that interested decision-making in the basin will continue to grow. We've seen that every year. Earlier, Carly Jurla reviewed a number of the conclusions our team reached when evaluating the effectiveness of the 2007 guidelines. I think we could also draw on some conclusions from the DCPs. Deadlines are important. They focus action. Greater inclusion earlier in the processes will likely lead to more creative solutions with more buy-in from the affected parties. And we have to find ways to act more quickly to keep up with the pace of change and challenges. So when the work begins on post-2026 operations, I hope that everyone will engage with a shared sense of urgency and will work effectively to develop the next set of operations. I wouldn't want us to move so fast that we leave stakeholders feeling left behind, or move faster than it takes to reach consensus. But we all will need to work more efficiently and faster than we typically have in the past. 2020 has taught us, if we know anything, it's that we cannot take time for granted. In my career on the river, there are many examples where the hard work of all of you overcame the odds. From the Arizona Water Settlements Act of 2004, the Interim Guidelines of 2007, the extraordinary partnerships we have with Mexico, and the remarkable passage by the DCPs by Congress in 2019. The challenges will continue to increase in difficulty and scale, and so our collaborative efforts, they have to similarly increase. There's no place in the United States that has a better track record, and there is no place I'm more optimistic about. In closing, this is likely my last CRWUA as commissioner, but it certainly won't be my last CRWUA. It has been an honor, an absolute honor to lead reclamation, to work with you all in the water community. Together, we've made important progress to reduce the risk and improve management on the Colorado River. Be proud of everything we have accomplished. I look forward to seeing many of you in person again in the days and months ahead. Thank you for the time to visit. To our Mexican friends, Feliz Navidad. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. I hope you and all of your families have a healthy and a safe holiday season. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The same for all you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for your incredible vision, your example, and your leadership.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
At this time, I am honored to turn it over to CRWUA President John Ensminger for final remarks.
Thank you, Commissioner Berman and everyone else presented today for the updates. We appreciate the relationship we have with the Department of Interior and that we could provide a convening place for these important announcements and updates. Before we close today, I want to recognize the contributions to the river made by Terry Fulp, Brent Rees, and Roberto Simone. All three of these men dedicated significant portions of their careers to making this river work for everyone who depends upon it, and I believe our river community owes them a debt of gratitude. I would also like to recognize Jeff Keitlinger. I think everyone knows that Jeff had planned to retire earlier this year, but when the pandemic hit, he agreed to stay on and help lead Met and this river through these trying times. Thank you, Jeff, and I hope that we can give you a proper retirement party at CRWUA 2021. The work of this organization plays a major role in ensuring the future viability of all of the communities that rely upon the Colorado River for their water. That is something for us to keep foremost in our minds as we return our focus to the future of the river in the coming year. In closing, I just want all of you to stay safe, enjoy happy holidays with your family, and most importantly of all, I look forward to seeing everyone in person at CRWUA 2021. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you, President Ensminger. This concludes our CRWUA Federal Friday for 2020. Many thanks to the several hundred people that joined us today. And we also extend a special thanks to the CRWUA and Reclamation staffs that were instrumental in planning and coordinating this event. We look forward to seeing you next year, hopefully in person. Please take care, and yes, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. Happy holidays, Feliz Navidad. Please join me in a round of applause.